Hello, it's Tami, plays well with paper, guest designer for Whimsy Stamps. And today I'm going to be making a St. Patrick's Day home decor piece using some of the new releases from Whimsy Stamps. So one of the main things I'm going to be using today are the beautiful St. Patrick's vintage postcards. I think these are so lovely. And so I'm going to be using these, and I've chosen the two I'm going to use. I'm using the two that say Erin Go Bra or Ireland Forever. I'm going to be cutting out the center of these two pieces with some of the rectangle dies. So I pulled sprinkles and scallops and inverted scallops. I'm going to be putting them on one of the large vignette trays. This is from Tim Holtz Ideology, and there are two sizes of trays. This size, the 6x12, and then there's a smaller size than this. But for today's project, I wanted the large one. Now I'm going to cover this, and I wanted it to be continuous, and so I felt like a wood grain would be the best thing. I grabbed the Prim Colonial Americana paper pack, and there are two wood grain papers in there, and you can choose whichever one fits best with your decor. And I pulled some papers from the St. Patrick's Day Slimline card set, and you can see just some basic greens, and then this one, which is a little bit more colorful. And I thought what I will probably do is, using my Slimline Shamrocks die, I'm going to go ahead and cut a background out of it. First thing that I will have is a Slimline background that I can use on a card at some later point. But what I'll be left with will be all of these little shamrocks, and that's what I want to be able to finish this. I want to just kind of put a spray of shamrocks coming up and down on this. And then I can use this paper to simply cover the edges of my vignette tray. So that's my plan for today's decor piece, and I am inviting you to come along and let's get making. You want to begin by taking some distressed collage medium and a brush, and brush a nice layer over half of the solid side of the vignette tray. And then you want to press a whole 6x6 piece of the wood grain paper into that collage medium, and then press it down. Make sure there aren't any bubbles, that there's good connection between the paper and the wood surface. And then do the exact same thing to the other side, a nice layer. You don't want it too thick, but you do want a nice enough layer that it doesn't dry in between where you start and where you finish that section. And then do the same thing, lay the second piece in, and you can see that I have it so that you won't be able to tell where the two pieces lined up. And then I always take a sanding block and I sand the edges of all of the paper when I am working on a vignette. Now I measured the side, and it was, I think it was 1.25 inches, but these are 3.5 inch pieces. So I cut inch sections, and I'm going to make up that 1/4 inch with this extra paper over here. I'm cutting 1/4 inch strips off, and then I'm going to attach the inch pieces and then the 1/4 inch pieces as a little border. You can put that border either on the top or the bottom of the sides of the vignette tray. And once you have all of your paper cut to cover the sides, you're going to do the same thing that you did with the top. You're going to put the little, a nice layer of the collage medium, and then you'll put both pieces, the 1/4 inch strip and the 1 inch strip, and then press those down to make sure that they get a good connection. If you notice that some of them just aren't staying down, add a little bit more like I just did, and then press that down onto the wood. Now you can see that I went to the other side because I want a chance for that to really be able to connect with the wood. And so I am doing the same thing to the opposite side. And then I'll do this also to each of the ends. Layer the same 2 strips of paper in the same way. Now, these aren't going to make it all the way down to the end of the vignette tray. So you're going to need to piece some of them together. There will be a little seam there on the end, about 3 inches or so. So this is how I do it. I went ahead and I put a whole strip of the green and a whole strip of the shamrock. And then once it was pressed down, I just trimmed it off. I'm going to go ahead and be sanding this as well. And so it's okay if there's just a tiny little sliver hanging over the corner. I'll sand that off when I sand the edges. But you just press that down, get it nice and attached, then trim off the excess. And you want to be sure that you do this not only to both sides of the vignette tray, but also to both ends. Now it was time to get started with the vignette postcards. So I got out the reverse scallop rectangle dies and I cut some white heavy stock out with them and also the postcards. I used the largest reverse scallop die and the largest rectangle die in the set, and that gave me 3 pieces to work with. I had rectangles for the center and then the scallops for the frame outside. So I cut 4 out of white heavy stock for each of the postcards. There were 4 rectangles of the white heavy stock, and I glued 4 of them together. And then I put something heavy on them. And once I felt that they were dry, I took one set of 4 white rectangles and I attached the rectangle part of the postcard onto the front of it. So I have 2 of those with 4 pieces of white heavy stock behind them. So that made them fairly substantial. And then for the reverse scallop frames, I did the same thing. I attached 4 white heavy stock frames together, and then once they were stuck together, I went ahead and added some glue to the back of the postcard frame that I cut out, and that made a nice thick frame for the outside. And I set those aside to dry. And while those were drying, I got out my Slimline Shamrocks die and my green papers from the Slimline St. Patrick's papers. And I'm going to cut it so that I end up with a bunch of little shamrock embellishments in 2 colors. And also that leaves me with 2 slimline card fronts with lots of shamrocks for a great background. I'm going to set those aside for another day and another project. And then I reached for the new Celtic Knots die set. I want that 4-leaf clover. I'm going to cut it out of the same 2 green papers. And I added those to the shamrocks that I got from the Slimline Shamrock. Now I want these to have a little bit of a shape to them. I didn't want them just flat, just some dimension. And so I got that by using a stylus tool and rubbing the little stylus ball end into the paper. And if you rub it onto the paper on the back side, it will start to curl. And then I turned it over and I put the stylus in the middle and it just kind of made a dimple that made it look a little bit like a shaped 4-leaf clover. Now I wanted to add a little bit of some gold, but I also wanted you to know that on that little piece that I didn't add anything to, I added some Wink of Stella for just a little bit of shimmer. And then on the outside of the frame and also on the square or rectangle pieces in the middle, I used my finger and I put some of the foundry wax around the outside and I let a little bit get onto the front too on the corners. You can see I do the same thing here, putting it along the sides and then putting a little bit on the corners just to kind of make it look a little gilded. And then when you add heat to this, it will turn kind of a gold gilded look. And it cleans up with alcohol. And I found that these Honest lavender alcohol wipes work really great for that. And so I just get those off Amazon. That's my little tip. But here I am with my heat gun going over the foundry wax, and then it turns into a gold gilded look. I'm doing the same thing to the corner, top kind of sides and corners of that vignette tray. I did it all the way around, and now I'm heating it again just to give it some, again, of that gold feel. And then I don't show it on here. I guess I didn't film myself, but I did flick a little onto the back. So you may see that here and there. I did a messy flick of the wax just to give it even more kind of a distressed gold look. So there I'm trying to show you that shimmer from the Wink of Stella pin on that little leftover piece. I did not add anything to the backs of the kind of middle piece, I guess you'd call it, between the frame and the rectangle. I just added that Wink of Stella shimmer, and I'm attaching that right to the wood grain. Now I have those 4 layers of heavy stock on the back of this outside frame that I added the foundry wax to. And so I'm putting that in place, and I'm using Distress Collage Medium for that. And then I put something heavy over it. I did the same thing to the other side. And now I'm just trying to show you a little bit of that foundry wax and kind of what the gold shimmer looks like. And for these, I know that I have the 4 layers of the rectangles behind these as well, but I wanted them to stand out a little further than the frame. And so I put foam squares behind it. I'm adding a little bit of collage medium in the middle of those foam squares and then pressing down so that I have quite a bit of dimension on the frames. Now I put these uh, shamrocks and things in place. And so I wanted to kind of show you how I did that. And then now I'm just gluing them down with collage medium. And I'm just kind of going through it, putting a little collage medium on the back of each one and trying to make sure that I have them in the place I want them. I'm going to use this sentiment, and I'll show you what I do with it later on, but it is from the Celtic Mix Quick Card Fronts set. And so I just continue sticking them all down. You can see I have them in the top left and the bottom right corner, as well as through the middle here. And you can also see that I have put these on the side. I definitely wanted this to go horizontally. I am adding the gold tinsel sequin confetti from This Calls for Confetti. It has kind of some little lines on it. I think that's really interesting confetti. It wasn't just a flat gold, it had the lines, and it kind of reminded me of the wood grain, so I chose those. I put some in the middle of the large Celtic dots dies that are there in the center. And then I just put some here and there next to the smaller shamrocks, and I attached those. So I did that all through the center, and then I also did it on the corners around each of the um, ones on the corners. So I'm kind of showing you quickly here, but I will have stills at the end, and I will um, there will be stills on the Whimsy website of this project as well. All right, so I wanted a little gilding on the sentiment from the Celtic Mix Quick Card Fronts. So again, I wiped some more of the gilded foundry wax gilded on there. And then I am using my heat gun to go through and make it shiny. And now I'm adding just a little bit of collage medium to each end, and I'm putting that across the center. It says Irish Blessings. The finished piece looks so great. Love the greens in the Slimline St. Patrick's paper pack. And even though there wasn't enough to cover the whole thing with the 2 pieces, I love that little 1/4 inch border. Then adding the wood grain from the Colonial pack and edging that with just some of the gilded foundry wax is perfect. Sprinkle a little bit on there. The dimension that's shaping those shamrocks and the Celtic knots just perfect. I love the little bit of shimmer there in the inside bit of those frames, and also just the pop of shine that the confetti adds as well. I think it just all came together really beautifully. I wanted to show you a few of the details. So in this still, you can see the dimension on the shamrocks and the frames. Here you can see the shine on the foundry wax and that wink of Stella just peeking through on that tiny frame in the middle. And then here are the whole little swoops in the corner, and also the one that goes through the center with the sentiment Irish blessings. Also wanted to show you those beautiful pieces of confetti, and then the whole thing all together again. I want to thank you so much for following along with today's tutorial, even though it was a little longer again than normal for this home decor piece. I hope you're inspired to make one for yourself. And before I go, I do want to remind you to please be sure that you're following Whimsy Stamps on all of their social media platforms so you don't miss any of the amazing inspiration and new products.